and if we kind of stop there before we talk about the yellow car,
Sure.
one of the advantages in coming into it this way, and I think a lot of enthusiasts would have a similar progression, is you have the car, you like modifying it to make it better. And then it
Mhm.
gets to that point like, well, hey, if I really want to take this to the next level is some level of competition where, okay, one, there's a big benefit to me taking weight out of the car.
Mhm.
So now I'm at a point where if I really want to go to that next level, I need to take out a lot of the daily comforts, if you will, to save weight, or to bring in a cage or like a half cage, like Nigel said, from a safety aspect to
Mhm.
really take it to the next level. So you kind of get halfway down to the progression of the car, and then like that's kind of the point of a return where it becomes more of a purpose-built competition car versus something that you're, daily driving 12,000 miles a year still, but then
Yeah.
also trying to compete with. And so I guess one of the advantages of that is it's exactly the way you want it to be at that point.
Mhm.
When you make that next move, you've got it to where you want it to be, and then you're just bringing in these couple small changes to then make it so you can now compete with the car.
Right.
Yeah.
So, so the alternative to that is to buy a race car that is already purpose built, take delivery of it, and then start off. Now, before we jump to your yellow car, I will say for us as the shop, we've done both. Our first two rally cars were both rally cars that we basically bought as turnkey, like this logbook competition rally cars that we just basically took on and then started campaigning with them and made modifications, through the course of having them. The third rally car, which is currently I think it's black still, the black one, um, that we built from the ground up. And then the Pikes Peak car, that one, actually, like the small story behind that, it was a flood car. There was a crazy flood in Boulder in 2013, and that WRX, for some reason, was stuck in the back lot. They couldn't get it out. It was underwater for 2 weeks. The interior, of course, was trashed, but we discovered that the engine was in good running order, and at that point, that's where we kind of inherited it, and it turned into the Pikes Peak car that it is now. So we've bought into two race cars, and then we've also built two race cars. And so we've had some interesting experiences in both regards. But certainly, like, I guess kind of to like what Tasso was looking for, a competition car, there's certainly an advantage, or can be an advantage, in just, instead of trying to build from the ground up, just finding a car that's like 60 to 80% of what you want, that already maybe has like a cage and some of the safety equipment in it. You buy that, and then you just kind of tweak it from there. So Ryan, that's kind of where you're at with at least the yellow car. So maybe talk about some of that experience. What's that's been like?
Sure. So yeah, so we bought the yellow car. We got a pretty good deal on it. Part of all the circumstances and stuff behind it, but it's for the listeners and the viewers that don't know, it's an old super endurance car from Japan, super Takaiyu car, and it is a factory built car by Provo Eiffel for Subaru. So it's pretty much like from the ground up. It's a non-bin, built from the ground up race car where everything is seam welded, stuff that like I've never even considered or would have ever considered before is done to it. And then there's a lot of things that you look at from like a replication standpoint that's like, well, that's surprisingly simple. Like it's kind of silly I've spent so much money as a workaround to this one aspect when like
Hmm.
that's a solution right there. And so bought that car with the intention to do not nearly as fast stuff with it, like the blue car. Learning from kind of I wouldn't say the mistake, but chasing that time. There's other aspects of driving that I like to do, and driving is part of it. And this car is built at a level already where it's like 80%, maybe 90% there, like structurally and the
Hmm.
bones and everything. And with some more money and some time, we're getting the car kind of revamped enough so that it can go out and start doing more stuff and getting some drive time in and stuff.
That's awesome. And kind of like what we talked about in the last episode a little bit, in
Mhm.
with yours having purchased like a competition car that really was built to compete at a pretty high level when it was built, there's a lot that
Mhm.
you actually learn just by getting it and having it so that you can actually really go through the thing. There's a lot of details that you've seen and gone, okay, that's a really good idea that I need to duplicate on any of these
Mhm.
other cars that I'm building, and that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
And I will say, well, I would say the other thing that I really liked, or that I think is an advantage in buying like I guess I'll speak specifically to a logbook rally car, something where you are going to be competing in a series that has a pretty um, strict and well-defined rule book. If you
Mhm.
so I guess just a footnote here, what a logbook is when you have a rally car that's logbooked or a race car that's logbooked, you have basically it's a book that records every event that the car has been to and competed in. And so each time you go through tech, they will sign off on your logbook for the event. So when you if like in our case when we bought the logbook or the car with the logbook, then we went on to the next event, and so we were the sixth event for that car and all the subsequent events. But we knew that that car had been through tech and passed all these other
Mhm.
5 events. So we knew that basically, as long as the car was in good running order, we were going to make it through tech and we could get through. Um, which is, I mean, it's comforting to know that to a certain extent versus building a rally car from scratch. Because with the black car, the third one that we built kind of more or less from scratch, going through tech was a little bit more nerve-wracking because we were taking this car on its maiden voyage and it hadn't been through tech yet, and we were really, making sure that we had read all of the details in the rule book and we had everything that we needed to get through tech. So that's we ended up making it through fine, but it was like that was a pretty stressful tech experience, and for the Pikes Peak car too. Even though we were only like about, let's call it 30 to 40% of the build of that car before it went through tech, that first time through was like, well, okay, let's see what they're finding. Like you're paying a lot of close attention as all the scrutineers are going through the car, and,
Mhm.
and like they do this like a test on the wall thickness of your cage and all this sort of stuff. It's like, all right, let's hope that this comes through okay. And it did, but it's just, hopefully that's the case for everybody. But
I think it
Mhm.
it brings up a point that I was hoping that we were going to talk about with the whole built not bought thing, or building versus buying thing. A lot of the advantage to buying a car, or I guess I'll rephrase this: two of the kind of the caveats to buying a car, the two kind of major hangups. The biggest one is whether or not that car was built for what you plan on doing with it.
sure.
It's like
Mhm.
what Ryan is running into here. It was built for a series that doesn't even exist on this continent. So he's had a fair amount of work to re-prep
Mhm.
that car for what he's
Hmm.
doing. And there's absolutely value to the other stuff that does carry over between the series.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Well, right, if you want to compete in stage rally, say, now that ARA has been around for a couple years, buying a car that is logbooked with ARA, sure, it gets you through tech on those chassis preparation things more
Sure.
easily. And then I think the other kind of caveat I want to talk about here, because it does also apply to your Super Takayu car, is factory built cars, or you know a car built by a business, whether that's a prep shop or a factory itself, or ProDrive for SDI for WRC even, right? The driving factor for that car is financial, not competition necessarily, right? And the distinction there is that, so I noticed there's things on your car that I have done to lighten my car, and maybe in this particular example, it has to do with minimum weight requirements or something like that for the series that that car was built for. But you take an so-called unlimited build car, and usually it's built by the amount of man hours that a company is willing to pay to have a car prepped, right? Versus
Mhm.
time to me is free. Um,
Hmm.
as I've built my car, it hasn't ever been limited by the amount of man hours that I'm willing to pay someone else to cut stuff off the car for lightness, for example, right? I mean, so there are advantages there, right? You bought a car that has amazing suspension work done. There's absolutely value, and even just paying for the knowledge of what they did to prep the suspension on your yellow car. But it's also limited in what the build cost was because that company had to pay employees for man hours. You know, me not having to, that's not the limiting factor for me. So
Sure.
this two kind of things I thought about looking at your yellow car in terms of the built not bought kind of thing.